Welcome to Rising Waters, Planning for Flooding in the Ocean State, part of the online series Providing Resilience Education for Planning in Rhode Island, or PREP-RI. I am pleased to introduce the speakers for this module. I am Melinda Hopkins of the Rhode Island Emergency Management Agency, or REMA. I am joined by Wayne Barnes, Senior Planner and Deputy EMA Director of East Providence, and Joseph Warner Jr., the Charlestown Building Official and Floodplain Manager. The PREP-RI series is designed to support local decision-making and community resilience. By the end of this module, you will be able to recognize different flooding scenarios in Rhode Island, describe the social and economic impacts of flooding, and identify flood mitigation examples, opportunities, and programs. So why should we care about flooding? Hundreds of miles of Rhode Island's riverine and coastal shorelines have been historically used for business and pleasure. Many of these areas lie in floodplains and may be vulnerable to disruption and damage. In fact, flooding is the most prevalent and frequent natural hazard that impacts Rhode Island. We can be proactive and take steps to reduce risk. Much of Rhode Island's economy relies on coastal businesses. A 2016 Special House Commission study found that Newport alone has more than 500 businesses at risk of flooding, including 50% of the city's hotel industry. Rhode Island has approximately 17,000 structures, including public, residential, and commercial, and about 40,000 residents within the 1% annual flood area. This flood zone, historically referred to as a 100-year flood, has a 1% chance of occurring in any given year. Another way to think about this is that over the course of a 30-year mortgage, there is a 26% chance of this type of storm. Flood maps show the 1% annual flood and the 0.2% annual flood areas. So what exactly is happening? Over the past dozen years, Rhode Island has experienced significant flooding due to hurricanes, nor'easters, and other heavy rain events. In 2005, heavy rains swelled the Blackstone River more than 5 feet, causing over $11 million in damages. In 2010, rains over the course of a month caused massive flooding of the Pawcatuck, Patuxent, and Blackstone River basins, severely impacting interstate highways, treatment plants, residences, and businesses. In 2011, Hurricane Irene caused flooding as well as severe wind damage in many areas across the state. In 2012, Superstorm Sandy resulted in extensive damages and over $100 million in private insurance claims from storm surge and erosion. Flooding can occur with daily high tides or intermittently with storms. Along the coast, tidal flooding affects low-lying areas during extreme high tides. Flooding due to storm surge, which occurs when strong winds push waves landward, is less frequent, but can devastate coastal floodplains, especially when a storm hits at high tide. Inland, heavy rainfall may inundate areas more rapidly than our environment and infrastructure can absorb it, resulting in riverine and flash flooding. Sea level rise will amplify both tidal flooding and storm surge, causing more widespread damage to coastal areas in the future. Riverine flooding is becoming more common in Rhode Island. Rhode Island's rain events have become more frequent and intense due to changing climate conditions. Increasing precipitation results in increases in flood risk, which is made worse by development with hard surfaces like roads and parking lots that prevent water from soaking into the soil. Before 1970, many local rivers experienced a flood event every 5 to 10 years, but today we are seeing flooding every 1 to 3 years. In many cases, the severity of the flooding is worse as well. Now I will turn it over to Wayne.
So what can we do? As municipal decision makers, we realize floodplain management cannot be an afterthought. Cities and towns are working to be better prepared through their local planning efforts. Some examples include comprehensive and hazard mitigation plans, floodplain ordinances, the building code, and the National Flood Insurance Program, or NFIP, and standard operations around emergency response and recovery. The comprehensive plan and the hazard mitigation plan do not exist in isolation. They build upon and reinforce each other. Information about recurring hazards and past impacts identified in the hazard mitigation plan help to determine priority hazards to be included in the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan establishes goals, priorities, and actions which become the blueprint for the community and its decision making. A comprehensive plan's 20-year planning horizon and its 10-year implementation programs must consider climate change, flooding, and hazard mitigation. Municipalities must comply with their local floodplain maps and ordinances, as well as the state building code, which includes minimum standards for building in floodplains. A community which fails to adhere to these regulations or which grants variances in floodplains risks its National Flood Insurance Program status. Municipal emergency management administrators establish plans and procedures to ensure effective responses to an emergency. For example, East Providence response personnel and affected neighborhoods now receive notification whenever flood gauges in the 10-Mile River reach the level at which minor flooding is expected. This provides municipal leaders additional lead time to prepare for possible flooding. Everyone wants a safe community, however, challenges exist. At the heart of many decisions is weighing short and long-term costs and benefits and finding a balance that works for your community and your tax base. And now I will turn it over to Joe.
Municipalities have opportunities to do more to reduce the risk from flooding by protecting, accommodating, or avoiding impacts. Cities and towns can incentivize developers to build to higher standards, join the community rating system, retrofit municipal properties, acquire flood-prone properties, and engage residents through outreach programs. By state law, municipalities are not permitted to modify the Uniform State Building Code. However, they may establish incentives to persuade property owners to build to higher standards. Elevating structures higher than minimum standards reduces flood risk and flood insurance premiums. For example, under a new definition for building height in the Rhode Island Zoning Enabling Act, freeboard of up to 5 feet may be excluded from municipal height calculations, providing an incentive to elevate more than is required. Many communities are going above and beyond by participating in FEMA's Community Rating System, or CRS program. This voluntary program recognizes and encourages community floodplain management activities that exceed the NFIP minimum requirements and saves policyholders money on their annual flood insurance premiums. Benefits to the community include enhanced public safety, a reduction in damage to property and public infrastructure, avoidance of economic disruption and losses, reduction of human suffering and/or loss of life, and protection of the environment. In addition, policyholders in 10 participating communities will receive discounts of up to 15% on flood insurance premiums. This kind of savings can catalyze community interest and action around hazard mitigation. Municipalities and property owners can significantly reduce risk by elevating critical elements such as utilities and information technology infrastructure above flood level. Newport, for example, is drafting guidance on elevating historic buildings while maintaining village character. Bristol has installed backflow valves to prevent sewage from backing up into buildings as a result of rising waters. Westerly and Barrington have elevated several coastal properties using grant funds. Cranston has also used grant funds to acquire vulnerable properties to restore the floodplain. Outreach is key to overcoming the challenges presented by flooding. Decide what works best for your community. Charlestown sends out a biannual newsletter to all property owners, informing them of best practices to reduce flood damage and insurance premiums. The building department proactively advises property owners on the regulations. Bristol took a community-wide approach, creating an outdoor education program with signage explaining the impacts of historic hurricanes. REMA administers hazard mitigation assistance grant programs. The Flood Mitigation Assistance Program funds projects that reduce flood risks to buildings insured under the NFIP. The Pre-Disaster Mitigation Program funds hazard mitigation planning. The Hazard Mitigation Grant Program assists in implementing long-term measures following presidential disaster declarations. Remember, a FEMA-approved hazard mitigation plan is required for this funding. There are many other funding options that municipalities have used. In summary, there are floods which impact Rhode Island communities, but there are many tools, strategies, and funding opportunities available to help mitigate and lessen the impacts of flooding. Thank you for viewing this module. Go to the Prep Rhode Island website to see the resources document and presentation notes, to fill out the survey and give us feedback, to get your certificate, and to view the other modules. The Prep Rhode Island team acknowledges the support of statewide leaders, experts, and practitioners who helped to make this a reality. And thanks to the Prep Rhode Island team for pulling this all together.